Hey everybody, it's Michelle Bradford, a Parents Advocate again. I'm also writing a book. Right now the working title is, I'm going to take these off because they're glaring, but I'll have to put them back on because I can't see. I'm writing a book. It's not the first book I've written. I also write books under the pseudonym of Shelley Arcone. But I am writing my memoir about my experience with the department. And a month ago, I gave a little speech at Sober Solutions in Newport Richey. And it was videotaped, but it didn't come out so well. But today I thought I would read the first chapter. Of course, it's going to be edited probably umpteen times before it actually makes the press. But I figured today that I would read the first chapter to you all so that you get an understanding of how it happened, of how and why my children were removed from my home. Chapter 1, 1992. I'm telling you, she's not normal, my mom had said. The umpteenth time she'd made that accusation since my divorce from my first husband. Her vagina looks like a freight train, or looks like a freight train went right through it. Doing my best to avoid her dramatic explanations, I rushed out of the room. Many times I wished my current husband, Dan, was home more to help her get her off my back. But he worked 40 or more hours a week at an air conditioning company while trying to get his own contractor's license. He had big dreams and wanted to be the main provider of our home. If a mother didn't have to work, then she shouldn't. That was his thinking. What if he did something to her? That might explain why she eats her poop. She followed behind my swollen heels. A human pit bull, she wouldn't let go of this jugular vein. And the little one, all she does is play with herself. I stared straight ahead, biting my tongue, looking for a place in my own home to lose her. My back ached from my new baby belly. The last thing I wanted to believe was that some father, let alone my messed up ex-husband, had molested our then 3- and 2-year-old daughters. He had issues with his crack and violence, but my gut told me he wasn't the type to do something this horrendous to his daughters. You know, she said, on Geraldo the other day, he was interviewing a woman about children of sex abuse. Your girls have all the symptoms. Maybe I should call the Child Protective Investigators. That was the last thing I wanted her to do. The last time she did that, she called on me when my older daughter was an infant. The allegation? I wasn't giving my daughter her antibiotics, and supposedly I had no food in my house. All untrue and unfounded. If he was molesting them, then the older one would show signs too. My oldest was 8 at the time, and she seemed perfectly fine for the most part. Nail biting and attention deficit disorder were her issues. Mom's insistence led to several visits with a local sexual abuse counselor. I figured it would put the accusations to rest, but it didn't. After several sessions, it spawned an ugly fight in court with my ex. CPI had been called, and I was told to keep the girls from visiting their father and his parents until further notice. I was happy not to have to send them because of his drug use and the head games he and my ex-mother-in-law played. In my mind, in her mind rather, the divorce, his drug habit, and his poor treatment of me were all my fault. It also didn't help that she displayed wacky religious tendencies. You and your mother of the devil, she had said on more than one occasion in front of the children. Needless to say, the drop-offs and pickups were often used to jab at me mentally. It didn't help that my daughters came back wound up from too much sugar. Every other weekend, their dad and grandparents brought the girls back in a hyper frenzy. For the next 2 days, they'd refuse to listen or go to bed at their usual times. "I told you," Mom said again. "It's not normal." This was her mantra. It played over and over in my head after she left for the evening. Neither is having you at my house 24/7, I'd grumble under my breath. Dan and I never should have let my mother and stepfather buy the house we lived in. We were desperate to keep it out of foreclosure. Now she thought she had the right to be in my life all day and every day, picking apart everything I did, from cleaning my house to raising my children. As long as I could remember, I wasn't capable of doing anything right. The week my ex-husband and his parents were denied visitation, the counselor suggested I take my 3-year-old to her pediatrician for a physical exam to see if everything was intact. I did. Mom went with me. This was the one time in my life I needed her to be the person I wished her to be, someone I could depend on. After all, she was my mother. She drove while I sat in the back seat with the younger 2 girls. The oldest sat in the passenger seat next to her grandmother. "I'm telling you, I know he did something. I just know it." Mom would back up her expertise with something she heard on Oprah, Geraldo, or the news. "Mom, you shouldn't talk about it in front of the girls." Since I couldn't control her, I gave up and stared through the car window at the gloomy clouds, something I had grown accustomed to doing when she would go on one of her rants. They had been a part of my upbringing. She even believed at one time that my own father had molested me. Small raindrops pelted against the car, keeping in sync with my mother's insistence. The combination sent my nerves into oblivion. My unborn baby had to share her belly room with fluttering stomach moths. When I got out of the car, water drizzled on my hair as dizziness washed over me. The thought of the doctor probing my daughter's genitals made me feel sick, and my mother's voice ripped into my eardrums. By the time we reached the second floor doctor's office, I determined my family's future fate. "Mom," I said, "can you go in with her, please?" Mentally and emotionally beaten down, I knew I wouldn't be able to. I had to trust her with my daughter. "Of course I can." I'll never forget her smile. Her teeth appeared more yellow than normal. Something icy twinkled in her gray-colored eyes. Face flushed, Mom rushed out of the exam room. "Yep, I told you. Her hymen's broken." The words came out in a high-pitched shrill. A grin faded from her lips and then quickened again. My knees went weak, even though I was sitting. The stomach moths mutated into rats. Nausea rocked and rolled my tummy. Sour bits hit the back of my throat. I could barely swallow as I gasped to breathe. This couldn't be, I thought. He was only a cracked-out creep. The door squeaked open. "I need you back in here," the doctor said. Mom spun on her heels and marched back into the room. The door clicked closed. Not long after, the doctor, my mom, and my sobbing 3-year-old came out of the room. At first sight of my tot, tears jumbled my vision. I tried to be strong and swallowed newly formed vomit lumps in my throat. I opened and extended my arms out toward her. "Come here, baby." And I'm not going to say her name, I'm just N. N ran toward me, her face stained red with tears, and snot ran down her lips, mixing with slobber. "Mommy." She climbed into my lap and balled her body up, hiding her face into my pregnant stomach. There she wailed. "I'm sorry." It was all I could think to say as I rubbed her back. "You know," the doctor said, "this is difficult." Immediately, I braced my child around my torso, stood, and made my way to the exit. I can't talk about this right now, and I didn't. Not with him, anyway. At a specific time and place in the future, this moment would come back and bite me. Dan cracked open a can of Bud Light, his nightly ritual. Is that what the doctor really said? He wasn't so sure. My mother's antics were more than harmless meddling in our lives. In his eyes, She enjoyed the confrontations with my ex and mother-in-law a little too much. Not to mention, she had even accused him of child abuse. Yes. For some reason, I felt reassured. The doctor had documented his findings. Do you really think he did it? No. How sure are you about that? He's a crackhead. Dan had a good point. Desperate people do desperate things. Drug addicts will do anything for a high. I stared out at the dusky pink sky. I'm not. Maybe he was desperate for a fix and let some pedophile do something. I choked. Visions of my helpless toddler being groped by a faceless man filled my mind. I still couldn't contain the ideal. Blinking a couple of times, I erased the images. Tomorrow, the state will be here to question us again. He guzzled half of his beer before he set the can at his feet and said, "One more thing. When are you going to get your mother out of our house 365 days a year?" The veins in his neck pulsed and his tanned skin went bright red. She's getting on my last nerve. He was right. She was a big problem in our lives. The last 24 hours had left me in a state of shock. My functions were on autopilot. I mindlessly went through my morning routine feeling as if I was watching my life from above. A knock at my front door interrupted the monotonous chore of sorting and pairing socks. I waddled toward it. The days of labor and delivery were fast approaching. I cracked it open and gazed out at an unusual-looking man. Fred Flintstone came to mind. A head of thick black hair made his pasty cheeks stand out. At his right side, a chubby hand clenched a large briefcase. With his other one, he flashed his credentials out in front of me and mumbled his name. I couldn't absorb what he had garbled, but understood he was from the state. "Who is it?" my mother hollered from one of the children's bedrooms. "Someone from the state." I pulled the door open wide and let him in. The man stepped over the threshold. He glanced ahead at the rustic recliner in my living room. "Do you mind if I sit there?" His awkward body clumped toward it. Air sounds puffed out from underneath his large bottom as he got stuck against the vinyl and plopped into it. No. I closed the door behind me, and my mind went into a flurry. Whatever I had practiced to say for that day took flight. Mom rushed into the living room, her hand extended toward the Fred Flintstone replica. "Hi, I'm such and such." Her mom. Her face beamed. "I'm so glad you've come to protect my grandbabies." Her voice went up a few gleeful decibels. Shoulders slumped, I trudged my weighted legs toward the couch and picked up some socks. Thank God I had something to do while I listened to my mother chatter. The state worker pulled a yellow pad and pen from his oversized briefcase. When Mom spoke, he scribbled it down. After a few seconds of listening to her rant, he lifted his head and peered over his pad at me. "Do you think your ex-husband would do such a thing?" I really don't know, and I didn't. My attention went back to my sock pile, sorting and pairing them. I definitely knew and understood mountains of this particular laundry. Some had holes and some had no mate and some were stained. The task didn't daunt me as much as the man and his questions. Does he have a drug problem? Yes. I wasn't going to offer any more information without him asking. The ex wasn't there to defend himself despite whatever negative feelings I had toward him. Yes, my mother decided to put in her 2 cents. He's used everything from pot to cocaine to crack. Why, he even beat my daughter when they were married. And his mother is a religious nut. She dominated the moment. I tuned out. I glanced at my grandfather clock, wanting this to be over with, and noting the time, 10 a.m. Something really did need to be done about her, but now wasn't the time. 30 days later, the state closed the case as perpetrator unknown, and that was in 1992. So, I'm wondering how many of you out there can relate to Chapter 1. If you like, you can leave a comment below. I would appreciate a comment. You can like and subscribe. And send your buddies. Thanks.